In this episode, we talk with Will Leach, founder and CEO of Mindstate Group and author of Marketing to Mindstates, who helps brands use behavioral science to understand what drives customer decisions. We explore the gap between what people say and what they do, and how AI can help marketers apply goals, motivations, and cognitive biases to their work. Will also explains where AI falls short and why human judgment still matters.
Welcome, listeners. Today we have on the show Will Leach. Will is the founder and CEO of Mindstate Group. Will, thanks for coming on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Hunter. I appreciate it.
So we like to open with the same question, which is, tell us your origin story.
Well, I grew up in South Florida, normal kid, liked baseball enough to think that he was going to be a baseball player and wasn't even close to making the high school team. So I pivoted to the U.S. military. I was in the military to start my career. Then I just went to undergrad and my master's degree in economics and econometrics. And I went down the path of market research. So for the first 15 years of my career, I was working for Fortune 500 companies doing market research. I was in biotech for a while, energy, and I found my way over to PepsiCo, where I ran shopper insights for Frito-Lay. I ran a couple of brands over there at Frito-Lay. But where I got a great passion, my career totally pivoted, was when behavioral science was starting to become invested in over at PepsiCo. And I write in my book, Marketing to Mindstates, about this investment that the company made, which is about a $20 million investment in a laboratory to study human behavior. And it just changed everything I thought of and knew about marketing, everything I knew about market research. And that just kind of put me into the position where I started my own company. And 12 years later, here I am.
Got it. And so help us understand, what the delta was there, like drill down on that. Like how was market research different from what you were doing with this kind of behavioral approach to things?
Yeah. So traditionally, market research it's kind of in its infancy. Really, the market research industry, you could argue, was started by Procter & Gamble maybe in the 1940s. So in terms of like real time out there, it hasn't been around for a long time. What market researchers do, and this is still very common in today's world, is we believe, or the industry believes, that if you ask people to rate something from a scale to 1 to 7, that 6 means something. And so what we've done is we do surveys and we do interviews with people and we talk about, hey, what do you like? What don't you like? What will you do in 5 years? And traditionally, we've all felt from a society, I guess, or from the industry, that when people tell us that they like something out of 6 or that they will buy something in the future, we felt like, yeah, they told us what they're going to do. But there's this massive say-do gap. People say things on surveys and they absolutely do not do those in real life. People say in elections they're going to vote for this person and then they don't even vote at all. So there's a say-do gap. Behavioral sciences was introduced to us in about 2007 by talking to culture anthropologists. We had neuroscientists on staff that started introducing this idea that actually we're not very good at understanding why we do the things we do. But there's a whole bunch of sciences out there that allow us to not only understand human behaviors, but also how do you message to the person in such a way that it'll tap into their subconscious. I tell my students, the first thing I'll tell them on day 1 in my class is I'll say that you make about 35,000 decisions every single day. And you're not doing cost benefit analysis, because if you were, you wouldn't get out of bed if you had to do cost benefit analysis on every single decision it takes for you just to get out of bed. That's why we have to understand behavioral sciences, because we've felt like, that people answer surveys and they're not that they're lying necessarily, but they just don't really know the real why behind their actions.
Right. People say they're going to do all sorts of things and then they never actually do them. And so are you, you mentioned that you have students. Are you teaching behavioral science or are you teaching market research through behavioral science?
Yeah. Different terms of my course. So at SMU, I live in Dallas, Texas. At SMU, I actually teach behavioral marketing, which is understanding how these non-conscious factors are applied to marketing. I also teach a class at Texas A&M University. I did my master's there. And I'm a part of the behavioral economics application unit over there. So it's a small professional course that you can take over there. In that class, I'm doing experimental design. So working with entrepreneurs to understand how do you set up experiments and do real research that truly, well, maybe not truly, that are better able to get to people's subconscious. And I also teach a little bit of behavioral marketing in that class.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is a show about AI. So let's get into it, right? You built an AI platform, I believe. Talk to me about how, AI in general, but specifically generative AI, right? The new stuff. How is that impacting behavioral marketing? And what are you using, for example, large language models for today?
Yeah. So we're kind of got two major things happening with AI in the market research field and marketing field. The first thing is what I'll call efficiency AI. And that is all artificial intelligence that's really trying to make marketing faster, cheaper, out the door, efficiency. And so our industry is really doing a lot of work in that space. In the market research side, nowadays you can actually do surveys with agents that are having a conversation with respondents, and you can deploy these at thousands in a minute if you wanted to. So rather than doing massive surveys or rather than doing one-on-one interviews, you hire somebody to conduct a 1-hour interview like you're doing with me, you can have artificial intelligence do that. That is about efficiency. What I'm more interested in is what I like to call effectiveness AI. It's, okay, yeah, we're going to strip costs. We're going to strip time out of inefficient processes that, companies like, Amazon and Apple, when they do market research and do the marketing, it's great. You have to remove that stuff. Where I focus more on is, okay, but when we do that, and let's say if we get efficiency, are we making ourselves more effective as marketing professionals? And I would argue that we're not. We are making things faster and we're making things cheaper, but that's not making our advertising any more effective. There's no correlation between the amount of money we're saving on AI and how fast we're able to produce AI and what people are, buying because of that ad, right? Doesn't seem to be any correlation. So what I like to do is I'm using AI to do two things. First is identify subconscious mind states. So I wrote a book called Marketing to Mind States. And in that book, we talk about these 4 subconscious factors that drive human behavior. It's my belief that if you understand these 4 psychological factors, and if you message those factors correctly into communications, your marketing effectiveness goes up a lot, right? People like marketing when it's done to kind of tap into people's intuition. So I'm doing a little bit of both. On the market research side, I have a platform called Bevi, my behavioral intelligence platform, where what I do is I do a specific type of market research to identify your customers, like these things that make them tick at the deep emotional level. Then what I do is I allow my customers to take Bevi and then do a couple of different things. One thing is like be an ad advisor, where Bevi will look at your advertising through the lens of your customer subconscious to evaluate it for you. Say, hey, here's what your customers should like. Here's what they may not like. Here's what I would recommend you do. And here's how I would tweak it. Like, in fact, it would generate a rendering for you. Another one is be a copywriter, where if you're doing your own emails or if you're doing like PR announcements or things like that, press release, I guess PR announcements, press releases, Bevi will write that for you as well. So in our industry, we have those 2 different kind of avenues. I'm focused a little bit more on the right-hand side at helping my customers become more effective marketers.
Got it. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, you're understanding these 4 kind of subconscious states, and you're helping develop copy or messaging or ads that kind of address, like, you don't know what state the user's in, right? But you make sure that you're addressing all 4 such that you're going to hit on one of them. Is that fair?
Kind of. What I use is priming. So there's this concept called priming, where you may, like, Hunter, I don't know your psychological mind state right now, but let's say if I did a study of 100 different hunters and I said, okay, when Hunter is in this specific mind state, let's say if you're going car shopping and let's say Toyota hired me. If I looked at 100 hunters, I'd say, okay, there are some themes that I see in these 4 factors. And if those themes hold true, which hopefully they do because we're doing research to do that, even if you're not in that state of mind, I should be able to take advertising that primes your goals for buying a car, what motivates you to buy a car. And it won't work on everybody, but it's more likely to work on a significant portion of those people because we've looked at the overall mind state of a segment.
Got it. Okay. So it could be any number of factors, right? I'm buying a car because I just had children and I care a lot about safety and my current vehicle is not safe. Like, that might be the kind of thing that you could then, using your messaging and advertising, like, prime me, like remind me
Remind you.
remind me. That's what you mean by prime, right? Remind me what I care about and then reinforce it. Right.
That's
And then
right.
that's going to, okay. All right. I get it now, I think. What are the four subconscious states? That's okay. It's in your book, right? This isn't secret sauce stuff, right? Okay.
Not
Yeah.
at
So
all.
what are they? Help us understand.
Sure. So if you want to understand why people do what they do, whether that's buying a car, like you said, or how do I get my kid to eat its vegetables, you got to understand four different factors. The first thing is we use goal theory. It's basically understanding people's goals. Like, and you just actually stated it, Hunter. You said, okay, so I had a child and so I'm looking for a car and I want it to be safe. That is a goal. Like, okay, I want the car to be safe. So we have these goals, but there are different levels of goals. There's functional goals. That's what you and I could talk about a car right now. I want it to be safe, affordable, have a lifetime warranty, color blue, whatever. Those are just functional goals, which are important in your messaging, no doubt about it, but they don't really drive emotions. The next stage is emotional goals. And so that is, well, why are those things important to you? Well, if I get a car, and let's just go back to your safety analogy. If I get a car that has a couple of these safety things that are going on, it makes me feel better about being a dad. Great. The next one is your aspirational goals. Okay, so if you feel like you're being a better dad, who does that allow you to become? That's where the big part of goal theory is. And then what I can do, if I can message to you in that way that says, okay, Hunter aspires to be the kind of dad that safety comes first for his family. And he's not going to let anything get in the way of him and the welfare of his family. I know that's really convoluted, but I now know how to grab your attention and maintain your attention without using sex or fear tactics or whatever, right? So the first factor is goals. Next are motivations. There's these 9 motivations that drive the vast majority of human behaviors. One of them is security motivation. You just talked about it. That's Maslow, right? Talked about security. But there's also ones like empowerment from Deci and Ryan, or belonging, our desire for affiliation. There's one that's called esteem, right? Our desire to feel respected. So these 9 motivations that drive behaviors. So if I prime, or if I put in some copy or a visual that communicates safety, belonging, esteem, achievement, etc., safety, I can actually create emotions. And we don't take action unless there's emotion that's driving us to act. The third one is something called regulatory fit. But basically, we either go after our goals trying to avoid pain or to get gains, right? So it's a very simplistic way of thinking about it. But imagine how I would message to you differently. If I was talking to you about Toyota and I was Toyota and I was messaging you, I could say things like, we will protect you, framing up as a prevention thing, as a cautious mind state. We can prevent something bad from happening to you and your family because of our great features. Or I can say, feel safer, a gain, something benefit. Feel safer by buying a Toyota. It's the same Toyota, but the way I frame up the messaging would feel more natural depending on which frame of mind you're in. So if you're cautious, that first one makes sense to you. You're like, yes, I want to protect my family. If you're more optimistic, you want to feel safer. Sounds small, right? But it's actually, it's easy to do. And copywriters forget about this all the time. And if you don't write to somebody's focus, is what we call it, or the way they approach their decisions, they actually just kind of, they get disinterested. And lastly are cognitive biases. We talked a little bit before the show here about Kahneman's work, and we have these biases, these cognitive heuristics, ways of making decisions very fast and very easy. If you're making 35,000 decisions every single day, you have to help people make fast, easy decisions. The way you do that is you incorporate what's called a heuristic or a bias. So the classic one is scarcity effect. Buy now, limited time only. The reason why that works on so many people, even though people say that doesn't work on me, it actually does oftentimes at a subconscious level, because when somebody tells you something's limited or, for a brief amount of time or whatever, then the mind creates meaning around that. And it says, oh gosh, if it's limited, there must be value in it. So I'm more tempted to take action. So there's a whole bunch of these heuristics. I have 21 that I talk about in the book. But if you understand people's goals, motivations, regulatory approach, and these cognitive heuristics, you can now message individually to these 4 different factors, and you should be able to create much more persuasive marketing.
So first, the aspirational level really spoke to me there. And I immediately had a visual, which was like me standing there with a cape being super dad. Like if I saw, a super dad pull in with their Toyota pickup truck, I would be like, yes, me. That's what I want to be. Second is a genuinely honest question that I'd like to bring back to my family, which is, what's the one where if you just mark something up and then add a discount to it, people, like, it makes some types of people want to buy it. I'm not going to name names, but they live in this house.
People use it's called anchoring. Yeah, anchoring effect. Yep, you anchor. I use it in my class. First off, I loved your visual of the super dad. That's literally a slide I use for my kids, for my students. So exactly what you're thinking about, who you are in your very best day. So there's this thing called anchoring effect, and basically what happens is we anchor the first number you hear in almost anything is something the mind takes hold of and says, okay, this is something I can now weigh a judgment. You can't judge anything outside of an anchor. It's possible. Like, is it big? Depends on what. Is it expensive? Depends. Is she cute? Depends. So the mind is always looking for an anchor. So that what you just said is called anchor effective. You can put up a $50 and you say, hey, regularly $50, but I'm going to do a one-time discount for $35, even though the product costs 10 cents to make. The mind, if you said, I want $35, the mind would go, well, that feels like way overpriced for something small, like, a 10-cent piece or whatever. But when you anchor to $50, but now you're at 35, the mind takes the judgment off the highest number. Companies do that to you all the time. Amazon does it to you all the time. I know that. That's why they take that number, they put that little line across it. There's all behavioral design elements in that idea.
Got it. And so the idea here is that not all techniques work for all people, but you understand who your customers are better, and their tendencies might tend to be influenced by some more than others. Is that fair?
That's very fair.
And the way you're doing these personas is similar to how we were doing them 5 or 10 years ago, right? It's still research, survey, like that kind of thing.
Well, we still have to talk to people, but we use something called projective techniques. So when you use visual techniques, you can extract some of the psychological factors. So looking at collages and things like that, but we're still having to talk to people in some way.
Okay. That makes sense. So, one of the things that I want, like, you work for Fortune 100 companies mostly, right? And Fortune 500 companies, which means that a lot of the people that are listening to this show right now can't afford you. And they're using Claude today, right, to help them write ad copy. If you're not, then you should be, by the way.
Should be.
What are some tips for them? Like, what can they do outside of, first of all, hire Will and Mindstate if you're going to be able to do so. He obviously knows what he's talking about. But for those of us that maybe that's out of reach, help them. Do you have some tips that you could share?
I do. So I gave you those 4 factors, right? And I know they sound very heady, but they're really not. You can understand at least 3 of those 4 factors by just doing this, by just asking your customers, hey, what's important to you as it relates to making a decision for my company, my brand, my restaurant, whatever it is that you have, right? Say, hey, tell me what's important to you. Let them list that off. Then just ask, why is that important to you? Like, collectively, why are those things important to you? They will give you that answer. If you have the answer to those 2 questions, I promise you have more behavioral insight into your customers than you think you do. Because when people talk to you, Hunter, they give you tells. They give you tells into their subconscious, right? So how I would use Claude. In fact, I'll tell you, I have a friend who works at Google, and here's what he did. So I'm going to kill my book sales, but here's what I'm going to do. He took my book and he dropped my book into Gemini, right? He had a PDF version. I don't know how I got the PDF. I do know how I got the PDF version, but either way, he took that PDF, he dropped it into Gemini and just literally said, hey, based upon this book and what you know about my customer, Claude can do this for you as well, help me understand the psychological mind state of my customers. And it did a really bang up job. He was talking about a customer. I can't talk about the company he did this for, but it was for a customer of his. And he ran it by me. I thought, my gosh, that's pretty darn good. That's that's a great way of using AI. A second way of using AI is don't even do that. What if you just did this? If you just said, I want to have a conversation with Claude and said, Claude, based upon what you know about my customer, what are their goals? And let it just list off those goals for you. Those goals are probably going to be the same goals that are in my book and the goal, because I'm doing my work off of goal theory. So just ask Claude, based on what you know about my unique customer or my ICP, what are their goals? Next, after that, help me understand what motivates my customer. Claude does a really nice job. Now you want to give it good information, and if you don't have good information, then you sure as heck better be saying, based on what you know about my ICP, out in there, and you'd be surprised. AI does a nice job at understanding one or two of those core motivations. If you just did those two things, that could take you a half hour. And then from there, say, great, now I want you to create an ideal consumer profile. So rewrite your ICP, but do it now, incorporate the behavioral psychology, the goals and the motivations that drive this customer. Have it rewrite that ICP for you. And then when you have that rewritten ICP, you use that in your Claude, right? And say, based upon, I now want you to create marketing based upon that ICP. And that's actually an easy way of getting more behavioral science into your marketing.
All right. I look forward to trying that and, see what kind of lift, we might be able to get from our, I bet it's tremendous. Are there any are there any statistics that you can share? Like, you don't have to tell us the name of the client, but like, what kind of impact do you see? Like, if you take, an ad campaign that didn't apply this framework and then apply the framework, like, what's the lift? Like, what's the diff?
Yeah. So I've had some good ones in my book of a project that I did at Pepsi. And this is the reason why I left Pepsi. In fact, because you talked about pivot points. I didn't experiment. Nobody knew I was doing it. I basically swiped my Amex credit card to do an experiment. I'll let you read that one day if you want to read the book. But in this one particular experiment, I had a 200 lift on my marketing, which is unheard of, by the way. So I'm not going to pretend like that was all my lift. But for the variables I could control, this type of marketing, and it goes through the whole example in the book of the words I used or whatever, is basically selling chips and sodas for one low price. I got a 200 lift. Other times I've gotten something very small, Hunter, like 1%, 2%, which isn't even in the realm of statistical probability. I would tell you that on the average, we see lifts between 15 and 20%, which is significant if you're a really huge brand. But sometimes, like one time, I increased Coca-Cola sales by about 20% for a project I did for Pepsi, right? So something's happened. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I understand all of human behavior. We got to iterate and learn. I think if people tell you they can get you more than 20%, I'd be questioning that. The human mind is so complex. And just like you said, right, Hunter, like, yeah, but how do you know my mind state? Well, I don't know your mind state. I'm taking some liberties. I'm trying to forecast your mind state. And frankly, your mind state could shift within this conversation. So it's pretty difficult to do. But I would say you should be expecting 10 to 15%. You should feel pretty comfortable. You should get that if you're using the components of behavioral design in your marketing.
That's bold. Well, that's a bold claim that I think a lot of people are going to give this a shot, try to prove you wrong. And so I like to ask this because it often leads to funny stories, but tell me about, a spectacular failure or where you find that the AI technology today just completely falls down and we're just not there yet and it doesn't help and it doesn't make it more effective.
It's a good one. I'll give you one. So I have a client who is a CMO of a brand, but he used to be the CMO of one of the top 3 restaurant brands in the world. The brand, right? So, but he decided to take a job closer to home. And so it's a slightly smaller brand. Now, this guy, he knows menu design because he ran one of these, the top 3 restaurants in the world. He ran marketing for him. So he felt like he knows menu design pretty well. So he uses Bevi, my behavioral intelligence platform. He has his ideal consumer profile and all that kind of stuff. And he was looking at redesigning the menu for one of his brands. He's got a few brands below him. One of the brands for kids. Looking at redesigning the menu, and he wanted Bevi to help him design the menu. So if you think about kids and you think about food, there are two things that are crazy happening in that. One is the mind of a kid. This brand was for kids probably the age of 10 and below, 10, let's say 7 to 10, right? So those kids, right, understanding what makes them tick and what menu, because the idea here is that they would go up. His idea was that when the kid sees the menu design with mom, I want the mac and cheese. I want the mac and cheese or whatever. So he has at least a strong influence on what mom's going to buy him. So he wanted Bevi to do menu design for him. And he didn't ask me, he's doing Bevi the way he wants to. And he was using Bevi to run the menu design. And Bevi came up with, when he looked at it, a reasonable menu design. Like, it was reasonable. He looked at it and was like, that makes sense. There's some mac and cheese, there's some nuggets, there's a mac and cheese with nugget combo meal. And he actually did pricing as well. So, but there's something that, what I love about it is there's something just like bugged him about it. And he was actually looking at some of the visuals that Bevi designed for him. And some of the visuals, for whatever reason, didn't feel right. He told me, it's like, this thing doesn't feel right to me. And the number of visuals that it did. So what I think he did, I think he worked in Gemini to do this. But I think we were using the Gemini model. But basically, he had a menu that had so many visual images that it created a lot of clutter. So AI was saying, this is a great menu. But he intuitively knew it. His instinct said, something's wrong with this menu. And then when he tested, he did some visual testing using AI, as a matter of fact. And basically it looked like there was so much distraction on the menu because there's baked beans and there's the hot dog meal. And then there's the mac and cheese with nugget meal. And there's all these different meals that the kid, it was hypothesized that he wouldn't be able to make a decision because his mind was wandering with all these different options. So in that case, actually what we did was we went back to Bevi, said, hey, Bevi, here's our concerns here. You have way too many visual images and the kids can't make up their mind anyways. Are we really supposed to be messaging to the kid or should we really be thinking about messaging more to the parent of a 10-year-old with kind of giving the child some leeway, I guess, in that decision? Totally different menu design came up. And this guy's intuition was like, yeah, this makes more sense to me. He didn't even know why. It's at the subconscious level, I think, but he intuitively knew that it made sense. It removed a bunch of the images. And then what it also did, well, actually what they're doing now is they're testing that menu in market right now. So I don't know the actual outcomes, but even me intuitively said that first menu that AI generated using food and kids was really off the mark, really off the mark.
Mm. Yeah, there's a term for that when something AI generated just doesn't feel right, but you can't put your finger on why. They call that the uncanny valley. Have you heard that? Yeah, like, you watch like a 5-second video clip of like and you don't know why. It's not like there's a third arm there, but it just doesn't feel right. Yeah, they call
I have heard of that today. So I wrote an article on LinkedIn today, but I didn't use that term. But I want to go back maybe and edit it. I literally, this idea of intuition, like you don't know what's wrong, but people, and what I wrote about is that people can know, even if you don't have the third arm, there's something weird about it. And in this article, I talk about, should we be hiding that we're using AI or should we be upfront? And what I argue is actually both of those questions aren't nearly as important as should we be messaging to our customer psychology? So some people are saying we should tell people when we're using AI. And there's other people like, no, we shouldn't. We should mask AI. We should camouflage AI because, when you tell somebody you use AI to do your marketing, it almost comes across like, well, that doesn't make me feel very special using, technology to do my marketing. The other side is if you don't tell people, the uncanny valley, I guess, people can tell. The technology isn't that great yet. People can tell. I wish I would have known that. I literally wrote that article today.
Yeah. Well, you still have time. Go back and edit. So I want to zoom out here for a minute to kind of close things out for the day. I don't think it's fair to ask for people to look 5 years out because it's too far and we could be living on the moon by then. But let's zoom out, 18 to 24 months, let's call it. Where does your space, what does behavioral marketing look like in 2 years? Or another way to ask that question is, what are you working on right now that you haven't been able to get into a production environment yet, right? Like where do you think it's going?
So I think right now, if you're a marketing executive, let's say you're CMO, you're a vice president of marketing at any type of firm, your ability to generate AI content has exploded 10x. And you know this. You can make, and these ads look great. I mean, they do. A lot of ads, you can put your branding on there. And now all of a sudden, what I'm finding is that marketers are overwhelmed with the amount of marketing they have access to, and they can't push everything out. So there's this judgment issue. How do I know which ad I should move forward with? There is intuition. Like if Hunter, you've with your job for a long time, so you probably know good marketing. Like you would look at it and go, that feels right for my company. But your junior marketer doesn't know what feels right for your company. They don't have that intuition. They haven't grown up with you. Same thing's happening with the senior vice president of some of these companies or just a manager of marketing, right? They get all these ads, but they don't know what to move forward with. Behavioral science and behavioral marketing gives you science behind what you should move forward with. So you could look at two perfectly beautiful ads and you're like, well, gosh, this ad over here looks really good. And this person looks like my brand consumer, but this over here has a great product shot and she's using my product. Which should I go forward with? There's science behind that. If you don't have the intuition, then there's science behind it. It's called behavioral science. We've talked about that. What I'm finding is that these senior executives, they can't take their judgment and give it to everybody. Like, and they're being requested, look at this ad, look at this ad, dad, look at this ad. They're constantly getting like approval. And like, I have to do my real job. I can't keep approving ads. So what I think AI is going to do is start allowing to take that intuition down to your junior marketers to where you can just design ads that are already intuitively in the right space. Or at a minimum, you can have something generated using Claude or whatever, run it through an algorithm of some kind. That algorithm is going to say, hey, out of all 15 of these ads, these are the 2 you should be focused on. These other 13, don't worry about. I think that's where I hope my sciences get more involved.
So you're talking about capturing intuition in a shareable way that was built over many, many years of human experience.
I'm not sure if I can capture it, but I can try to model it.
I
can try to model it as best I can, because I'll never know your company better than you. But with market research, I'm going to hope that I can get a lot closer to, we can eliminate 13 out of those 15, get them out of the way. And then Hunter, you take the next 2 and you look at it and go, oh, that's the one this is just, I know it. Because I don't think AI can really understand what you've learned over the last 20 years. That, like you said, the uncanny valley. I don't think it could do that.
Okay. I think we might have coined a new term today, but you can have the trademark on it, which is intuition modeling.
Write it down.
Yeah. I like that. And it's a great way to end the show here, because boy, does that apply across everything, right? Like that conceptually, the idea that you can model a senior person's intuition in a form that makes it kind of executable and deployable, outside of that person being involved, very well may be a huge part of what being a leader looks like in the near future. Fascinating. Well, with that, before we wrap, if somebody wants to get in touch with you about Mindstate, what's the best way to do that?
Yep. You can come to my website, mindstategroup.com. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, Will-Leach, you just look up Mindstate, you'll see me with the book behind me. But that's where I do most of my writing, my thought pieces, stuff like that. So just go find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. And then once a week, I write an article that I should have known about the uncanny valley. I write on Mondays. So anyways, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
And for those who are interested, tell us the name of your book again.
Yes, it's Marketing to Mind States.
Marketing to Mind States, I'm assuming on Amazon.
Barnes and Noble, yep.
Yep. We will be sure to have links to all of those in the show notes. So once again, Will, a great show, very interesting conversation, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.